This is all foreign to me. I usually get this will be delivered in January, sometime between 8 a.m. and 8
That's
p.m.
Uh-huh.
Listen, I learned this the hard way, man. And it's not quite the same. It's not business to business like you're doing, but moving from New York to Florida, yeah, I went with the cheapest moving company. Worst
Uh-huh.
decision I ever made.
Yeah.
They lost my
He's still
stuff
looking
in
for
3
his
months.
wife.
3 months. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan, alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianca. What's on tap today, Lou?
Matt, there is one industry you and I confront on a daily basis that is the backbone of America. And frankly, I just don't know enough about it. So today on the podcast, we have the founder and operator of LIWMI Logistics, a great trucking brokerage firm. And he's also the founder of the similarly named movement, Life is What We Make It. Randy Vlasic, welcome to the podcast.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Now, what's a nice Midwest boy like you doing in trucking? How did you get into such a tough industry?
It happened by accident. I when I was younger, I was always looking for a way to make money. I didn't really have much growing up, and I wasn't a great student, so I went to college for a little bit, but I was mainly in retail, and I was always looking for some opportunity, and I was chasing the dollar. I remember when I was a kid, I used to sell these $30,000 or $40,000 sound systems to people that come into Circuit City, and I'd always ask them, like, "What do you do? What do you do?" Because there had to be a better way to make more money, and so it led me to a multi-level marketing company, and the dream of building something and the income levels that these guys were talking about was exciting to me. So I got into financial services. 2008, you had the market crash. Mortgages was predominantly a big majority of my business, and I needed something that was more stable. So I actually had a couple buddies that worked for a logistics company that was local. They were looking for some salespeople, and I had a lot of sales experience, and so I took a leap of faith and got into third-party logistics and started out as a sales guy.
So for those in the audience that aren't familiar with third-party logistics, what is it you do on a daily basis, and how do you serve American commerce?
Yeah, in the simplest form, it's connecting shippers to trucking companies, right? People need to move things from point A to point B. They need vendors that can do that for them. So we help connect them to the proper vendors to move that freight. That's in the simplest form. Now it gets much more complex than that based on the supply chain of the company. Multiple locations, different modes of transportation, and how do you piece all this stuff together? So we do a lot of more of a consulting type basis to help them manage that stuff too. But we're basically the third party that's helping connect all those dots.
It's the Wild West out there right now. There's a lot of drama in this country, in the world, and it's definitely affecting your industry. I mean, the price of diesel is going through the roof. So what are you seeing on your end?
It's a lot of things. And to be honest, the fuel has definitely had a significant impact. I mean, we've seen the largest increase in fuel ever in this last few weeks. And, it's challenging to handle as a shipper. It's challenging to handle for us as a third party too, right? It immediately increases the cost of your supply chain. And that's not something you can really plan for. So on top of the capacity leaving the market, things have gotten tight. Companies are seeing, 20, 30% increases on their transportation spend sometimes. And that happened in a day, talking about $1 raise in diesel in just one day, just like that. And it continues to get tighter and tighter. So it has been absolutely wild. We're doing a lot of different things to help companies manage and package their supply chains or their transportation profiles in a way that makes it really, entices the vendors and the carriers to want to be a part of it and make that something that those carriers want to be a part of, right? And make it attractive to them.
Realistically speaking, how much of these costs, fuel, diesel, insurance, can you pass down to your clients?
We have to pass all those down to our clients. Really, the carriers are passing the cost to us, and we have to stay in business too. So what we've seen, like in the last few months, is prices have risen. So as a third party, our margins are getting compressed. And in order for us to stay profitable, we have to pass some of that stuff along to our customers as well, so that we can keep the integrity of our margins in a way that we can run this business. So we have to pass that stuff along. Now, there are different things that we do to mitigate, cost increases too. A lot of times, fuel is a impact that just happens immediately, but sometimes capacity tightens, and, carriers are just looking for money because they see the spot market changing. And so we try to look at taking the customer's whole freight profile, analyzing the data, creating a really, really nice way to present it to the vendors. And then we try to package it in a way as like a longer term relationship versus it being just a transactional relationship. Because a lot of transportation providers are working in a transactional way. They want to quote something here, quote something there, have a couple of vendors that they can try to compete against each other, and they think they're keeping the cost down. But long term, it actually drives the cost up. Right. So if we create this package and then we present it to a select list of vendors, and we can create this long-term relationship with benefits that creates more of a partnership mentality, it actually keeps the cost of our transportation from going up. So the market might change 20% or 30%. Now, that doesn't mean your cost isn't going to go up. But if we can mitigate that and your price only rises, 8% or 10%, then you're ahead of the game. Right. And so you're still buying less than the market is rising. And so you're still saving money, even though the cost is rising. So those are some of the things that we're doing.
I don't know what it is, but there's something about the trucking industry that is always getting a black eye in the American economy. Like during the pandemic, you heard all these trucking companies go out of business. Like, why is it that the trucking company carries the American economy on its back, but it's always the first one to get hurt on the front lines?
Trucking is a good indicator of what's happening in the world. They see it first. When you see like COVID and all that kind of stuff, and companies going out of business, it's because they're just being affected by what's happening in the world. And so, I think the transportation industry is seeing that first before the rest of the world actually happens, right? Before prices increase, all that kind of stuff, like it's happening to the truck drivers, and those trucking companies of the world. So, and that's just the first part of the supply chain for us as consumers when we're buying stuff at the store, and we don't really see that until the back end. But unfortunately, those guys are getting the blunt end of what's happening in the world and what's changing. You think about like COVID and all that kind of stuff. They start shutting down ports before you ever really see that hit at home, or the effect of not being able to buy toilet paper. There's a guy stuck at the border who can't cross the border to deliver, and so they're dealing with the front end of that.
So you said earlier that you got into the logistics industry because you met a friend, right? But what kept you there, and what made you come back again?
Yeah. Like I said before, it was income, it was money. I needed a way, I didn't have a college education I could stand on to go get a great job to start out. I had to find a way to create income. And so the sales aspect and being able to work commission based is what kept me there. And that's what I always wanted to be able to have an input and an output based on what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to be able to put in the work, and I wanted to reap the benefits of that work. And so commission and sales was something that I loved. And, when I was a kid, I was 24 years old, I was making well into six figures. I was doing really good with it. And the neat thing about transportation, though, outside of just the income, is the opportunity, and it's the randomness that we see. Every single customer, every client, even in the same industry, can be completely different from a transportation perspective, and how they manage it and what their processes and their go-to-market strategy is. And so every single customer that we talk to, it's unique in its own way. So the opportunity is great, and I stayed in it because of the money. But what I fell in love with was the ability to help companies really manage it in a way to make it a value proposition instead of it just being an operation on a P&L. And that excited me. Solving complex problems and putting solutions together that really drove, money to the bottom line and better visibility for the executives. Like that got exciting for me, and I just fell in love with it.
Randy, maybe it's the operations guy in me, but your industry has always fascinated me. Can you lift the hood for us for a bit? Let's pretend that I am a furniture manufacturer in the New York City metropolitan area, and I call you a very reputable logistics company in the Chicago area. And I need to deliver my furniture to my retailer, my dear friend Matt in Orlando, and I hire you,
Mm-hmm.
what does that chain look like?
Yeah. So if you're manufacturing that product in New York, I mean, depending on what your retailer
No,
is,
I
right?
manufacture it in New York, so that sofa is going to cost $42,000.
Say that again.
I manufacture that sofa in New York, so it's going to cost $42,000 wholesale.
Of course, right? Hey, listen, that's a great point, and that's where the transportation actually makes a huge difference, because if you're trying to deliver a $42,000 sofa to somebody, the last experience that they have with your company is the delivery, right? And so if they have a horrible experience on the delivery, that is a horrible reflection of your company. And a lot of companies don't really take that into consideration. So it's not just, can we move the sofa from point A to point B, but it's what does the customer on the back end really want with this delivery, and then how do we make their experience world class so that it reflects great on you as a manufacturer. So you might reach out to us and say, "Hey, Randy, we need to move a $42,000 sofa to some famous person in California." Well, depending on where they're at, is it a gated community? Do we need to call in advance? Do we need to schedule an appointment? Do we have to unpack that when we get there? Does it need to be brought into the house? Does it need to be put into a certain place? Are there certain requirements that I need to be worried about? Those are all things that go into it. So it's a lot of companies look at the shipment as like, I just need to move this from point A to point B, and how do I do it as cheap as possible, right? But really what matters is, how do we deliver the best possible experience to that client? Because even if it costs you $100 or $200 more to ship it with us to that client, if their experience is world class, that's going to come back to you tenfold and maybe in return business, and loving to work with you, because they know. Like a good example is we actually just did a bunch of furniture deliveries to a hotel. Huge project builds out. One of our clients is shipping furniture in, all kinds of fixtures and things like that. And like, hotels have specific requirements. You can't just bring the stuff in through the front door. It's got to come to a dock. It has to be after hours. You can't mess up their operation. Something as simple as just calling in advance and talking to them and understanding what those requirements look like, and how do we make this experience great? How do we not interrupt your operations? And how do we deliver this, like a ninja, right? Come in and get it done and get out. And the feedback we got was, wow, I can't believe that you've done this. I was just talking to my teammate about this. They're so excited about this. Like, they want to continue to work with us. And it's not our customer. It's our customer shipping it to them. But the fact that we called in advance, that we scheduled an appointment, we were able to work through our different schedules and find something that made sense. They're like, nobody does this. Everybody just shows up and they're like, where do we put this? Where do we unload?
This is all foreign to me. I usually get, this will be delivered in January, sometime between 8 a.m. and 8
That's
p.m.
right. Uh-huh.
Listen, I learned this the hard way, man. And it's not quite the same. It's not business to business like you're doing, but moving from New York to Florida, yeah, I went with the cheapest moving company. Worst decision I ever made.
Yep.
They lost my
He's
stuff
still looking for his wife.
Oh. Right.
3
And so,
months.
and we get so caught up in like, this guy's 1,000, this guy's 1,200, this guy's 1,500. We're talking about moving, my life. You want to move your life out to Florida. Like, this is important stuff. This isn't like, it's important. Is it worth $200 to you? Of course it is. And then after it's all said and done, you're like, damn, I wish I would have paid that $500. I just had another friend of mine. He's like, he reached out, and we don't move cars.
Yeah.
But I get so many requests. They're like, man, I need to move this car to a different city. And I tried using this company before, and I just got, it was a horrible experience, and it was all about cost.
Yeah.
There's so much more to it than that. But getting some folks to understand that's challenging in itself.
Oh, it definitely is. I mean, yeah, I was, first of all, I told my wife, just sell everything. We'll buy all new stuff when we get down there. So I paid for the moving company, and I bought new shit anyway because we didn't have furniture for 3 months.
That's right.
So now he's got to pay for storage.
So what did you do with the stuff? Did you end up finding it or no?
Half of it.
Found half of it.
They delivered half of it.
And you never found the rest of it?
No. And it was a nightmare, man. Here's the other thing, right? So they had their insurance, but it's bullshit. It was like whatever per pound. My insurance My insurance broker told me we were covered on everything where we weren't. It was a nightmare. It was awful.
Yeah.
But
So
yes, so that I'm a big believer in. I will gladly pay you more within reason if you do everything you say you're going to do.
And it's fair. And those additional things you just said, though, like that's the other piece of it. Like, is the insurance cover when I'm moving?
Mm-hmm.
Are we actually covered or not? You know, what happens when there's a claim? Who handles that claim? Who gets the freight back? Who's doing this? You know, as a consumer, you're like, I don't even know where to start with this thing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You know, but that's what we do. And that's where the value is driven to our clients. It's not in just moving it from point A to point B. It's
Randy,
knowing that stuff and being able
we live in a big country.
beginning.
So when you're transporting something transcontinental, let's say from Maine to California, what is the cost benefit analysis between using freight versus a plane? Like, is it the timing, or is it just the type of product? Because I would imagine it would be expensive to travel 3,000 miles.
It definitely is expensive. And timing is what drives the biggest impact to cost. You know, how fast you need those goods is what's going to drive that. And then obviously how you know, how much detail has to go into this final delivery, how much extra work do we have to put in to make this thing happen. So, you know, from an air perspective, yeah, I mean, it's going to be significantly more expensive than if you use a truck to move it, but it's going to get there in a day. You know, if you move a truck, you know, you're looking at 5 to 7 days. And if you put it on a rail car, then, you know, maybe it's a week, a little bit longer than truckload. But, you know, the more times that you have these different transitions inside of the shipment, the more chance you have of something happen. So I'll use, like, you know, less than truckload, for example, right? You can ship 5 pallets on a truck and buy 5 pallets of that truck. But if that truck has to stop at 4 other destinations, the chances of your freight getting damaged, the chances of something getting lost, there's a higher probability of that. And so it's not just the time. Sometimes it's what you're paying for from a service level, and it's lowering your risk factor as to the fact of what can happen. So, you know, when you have these, you go from your warehouse to a rail car, your rail car to a truck, from a truck to a train, you know, it's constantly moving. So there's opportunities for things to get damaged. So the more expensive, cost is going to be driven mainly by time, the requirements that are involved with that shipment. And then, you know, is it fragile or not? What mode do we need to use to make sure it's delivered properly?
So let's change the topic for a bit. Tell everybody a little bit about life is what you make it.
Yeah, so life is what we make it is actually LIWMI Logistics. LIWMI is an acronym for life is what we make it. And it's at the beginning I was like, man, this is the worst marketing idea ever. Like, nobody knows how to pronounce it. Then like a month after I launched the company, there was a company that came out. It's called LIWMI. It's a deodorant. And I was like, oh, this is horrible. You know, they're running commercials. And I was like, of course, right? It launches 2 weeks or 3 weeks after I launch a company. But life is what we make it is a movement. You know, I think growing up, like, I never really had a great mentor or somebody that could kind of help me along and teach me to do the things. I had to figure stuff out. And there were some times in my life where it was just so daunting and so challenging. I think there's so much opportunity in this world that a lot of people want to be a part of. They just don't know how to do it. And so after I exited my first company, you know, I realized that I was always driven by the numbers, and that's how I ran my business. And I forgot a lot about the relationships and the people that were a part of that. And so there were a lot of decisions that I made that I regretted in that business. And so after I exited, I had a lot of time to reflect because I didn't have nothing to do. And there was a lot of people I went back to, and I apologized. I said, you know, I made some decisions that I didn't, looking back now, I think I would have made differently. And I apologized for that. And I asked for forgiveness. And then, you know, when I started this company, I was like, how do I create something that takes care of people? And it's more about inspiring people and taking care of our employees and our customers and our vendors. And it's not just about the bottom line. And so life and what we make it is the concept that came to me. And so the movement piece, the podcast, the things that I'm doing, it's to inspire people to take ownership of their lives and build something meaningful. My legacy is not going to be, oh, he was a great freight broker or a great business owner. It's got to be something more than that. So if I can help people and they can help other people, that creates a ripple effect that can last for generations. And that's the legacy that I want to build. And so that's what life is what we make. That's the whole concept behind it.
I love it. So it's a community. It's the company for now. You're expanding. I know you have a podcast. Why don't you tell the audience about the podcast?
Yeah. So just launched the podcast. We're 5 episodes in now. It's basically, so far has been, it's just a solo show. It's just me talking about my journey through a lot of these different stages of my life and some of the challenges that I had. So the 5 pillars is identity, vision, people, mastery, and momentum. That's the whole pillars of the show. So I talk a lot about those things and what I've done in my life to make an impact there. We will have some guests on the show. Probably about 20% will be guests that we'll bring in that makes sense for the content that we're trying to deliver. That's the podcast piece of it. And, then we're trying to create a way to give back to the community, being in logistics, like you mentioned before, truckers are carrying the weight of the world supply chain on their back every single day. And sometimes they're getting the short end of the stick. And so I want to be able to give back to that community, being able to get healthy meals on the road, I think is really important. When they're out driving around, a lot of times they don't have the options that we do at home. So the first initiative we're trying to do is we're going to be taking a percentage of our profits and a percentage of a merch store. The Life is What We Make It merch, and giving that to the trucking community. And we're going to start by doing healthy meals. But my idea is that, we can, it's really fuel, it's rest, and then it's emergency, right? So the rest piece is, how do we provide clean facilities for drivers to rest at, places where they can go and shower up, and they can spend a little bit of nice quiet time and have a place to go. Maybe we can repurpose old buildings around truck stops that we can use to build some of that stuff out. And then the third piece is the emergency fund. When you have a family and the husband's out, or the father's out driving every single day, especially in the long haul, they're gone for weeks on end, and that sometimes is the single source of income. If that driver has he has a health issue or something happens, that has a major impact on the family. And so the third piece of this will be, how do we give back, some sort of emergency fund where we can come in and help those families out.
Yeah, the trucking community has it tough, single owner operators, right? If they get sick, nobody can drive it. If the truck breaks down, what do they do?
That's right.
It's a tough industry.
Yeah, and the majority of trucking companies out there, they're not these massive organizations. The majority of the companies are owner operators. These are, guys that are coming in. It's just them. They're not. It's not these large organizations. It's less than 100 trucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing about the industry in America, it's very fractured. You see a lot of small trucking companies. Do logistics firm like yourself, brokerages, try to put those together and create economy of scale? Is that your competitive advantage?
100%. Yep. If you're, if you're the Walmarts of the world, those massive trucking operations are rolling out the red carpet for you guys and taking care of you. But if you're a small to mid-sized organization, even mid-market, you just don't get that level of service from those types of companies, right? So if we can, take these drivers that really need the business to keep their trucks moving and keep their families fed, and we can package this into a whole freight profile, right? Because it doesn't matter how big your trucking company is. You can't have a truck in every single city and state in the country. You can't. But that's the benefit that we bring. So now if we have 10,000 owner operators and we can build this freight profile, and we can have, these smaller companies that meet the need for one lane here and one lane there and one lane here, and now we can package that all together. It drives, number one, money right down to the bottom line. Number two, it gives us a level of control over service level management and key performance indicators, and holding the trucking companies accountable to meeting expectations, right? So it gives us that leverage to do that.
Let me tell you a story about another nice trucker I knew years and years ago. Matt, I didn't tell you the story, but a couple of years ago, I went back to the old neighborhood in Brooklyn, and an old gentleman recognized me, and he goes, Luigi. He goes, sit down. I got to tell you a story. My grandfather had a trucking. My grandfather had a trucking company when he came back from World War II. This is in the 50s and 60s, and this is an agrarian society. So a lot of the farmers needed to bring their products to the market. The challenge was there weren't paved roads; these were all still like horse paths and donkey paths. So you'd have a truck, but you're on bumpy roads. So. He pulls up to the train station and he sees this gentleman who's now probably in his late 80s, 90s. And he saw that he was going to market. He goes, get in, I'll give you a lift. I got to bring, the wheat and the other produce. So he gives her a ride, but he doesn't realize in the box, he's got eggs. So he goes into market and the bumpy road, and it's a bit of a long road. So by the time he gets to market, half the eggs are broken. And he goes, I was named after my grandfather. He goes, Don Luigi, thank you for the favor, but next time I'll wait for the trade.
Yeah.
So
That's
the
funny.
business has changed a lot in those years, but it's still the backbone of an economy, regardless of where you are. So where do you take this logistics company with such a wholesome method? Do you just expand geographically? Do you expand numerically? How does one scale a logistics brokerage?
Well, the first thing is we're 100% completely remote, and I built a remote company, my last company, before COVID ever even happened. I had this earnout number that I had to hit, and I only had a certain amount of money I could allocate to growing. And so I had this problem. I was like, I need to hit this revenue target so I get this earnout money that I want, but they're not giving me any more money. So I was like, how do I fix this? I'm like, maybe I can go find people that are really, really great, that have business they can bring to the table. And if I can get those people to come work with us, they can't say no to that, right? If you got immediate ROI on day one, like who's going to say no to that investment? So I did. So I started finding people around the country that had books of business and could come on board, and it took off. I think we did like 12 million in our first year.
Wow.
And yeah, it was awesome. And so then we started building all this stuff.
Let's back up for a second. You said books of business. So these are other logistics brokers?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was so compelling that they left where they were at to come work with you? Was it the payout? Was it the split? Was it did you buy business essentially at first? Is that the way it was?
All of the above.
Okay.
All of the above. And a lot of times it's the operational support that comes along with it. There's a million agents out there and guys that are running their own agencies, and sometimes they just don't get the support. It's like, if I came to a logistics company and I'm like, hey, I want to become an agent, the number one thing to me at that conversation at the table is, how do I get the biggest percentage of the commission, right? That's always the conversation. How do this guy pays 40%, this guy pays 50%, this guy pays 60 or 70. That was always the most important thing. But then what you realize is it's not that, it's the support, right? Because if I can make 40% of $100 million, that's way better than making 90% of $10 million, right? And if I don't have the headaches that come along with that, like, that's value in itself. And so it was all of those things, man. It was understanding where they were currently at, what were the struggles that they were having, and then it was finding a solution for that individual and to entice them to come over. How do we build a solution around this person and get rid of all these problems that they're having? What support can we throw at them? And sometimes that is a very much an operational conversation to say, hey, listen, it doesn't make sense to pay you 70%. It just doesn't, because as a business owner, as a company, like, it's not sustainable for us to pay you that amount of money and provide tremendous levels of support, because there's people that go along with that and there's resources that you have to pay for. Sometimes it's looking at it and saying, hey, what we just talked about is all of these different operational problems that you didn't have. You didn't have people that were covering your freight. You didn't have the back end support on the accounting that you really thought you were getting. You didn't have the technology that you really thought that was sold to you. It really didn't deliver the deliverables that you were hoping for. But we can solve for this. We can solve for this one, and we can solve for this one. And so, it's 10% less, but giving you the ability to remove that stuff off your plate. The value is in being able to go do what's really most important, which is driving new business, sales, right? Finding clients, onboarding those clients, understanding that stuff. So let's cover the operations piece and then understand, like, how do we help you get more business? And so if you could be some agent, and there's a million of them out there, man. There's agents that are sitting out on an island. I just talked to one yesterday, reached out to me. Is like, man, I'm out here on an island and I'm an agent for this company. I got this TMS, I got this platform, I got customer base, but they're doing my accounting and billing, but I still have to find my own leads. I still have to do all this stuff. I don't get any coaching or any leadership. There's nobody that's really helping me grow, and it's not fulfilling for me anymore. I'm sitting here making a bunch of money, but I hate it. And I'm not part of a community. I don't have that today. And so I think it's all those things, tying all those together, man. And then, obviously the work from home piece when nobody had work from home was enticing too, right?
Yeah.
Cutting out the windshield time, having work-life balance, all that kind of stuff.
So did you train people from the ground up, or did you just go after producers already?
Today or in my previous company?
No, when you started making moves.
When I started my first company, I bought into a franchise of an organization because I never ran a business before. So the franchise model was good for me. It gave me the back end support. I bought a franchise. At that point, I had support. I had the training programs and things like that I could deliver. I had a franchise that would support me in that training. I could send people to them for training. It was simple. I can hire somebody who's brand new and do it. Now, I sold that franchise. Now, this company I built from scratch, and I didn't have that, right? I didn't have the training materials and all that stuff, the playbooks outlined. I didn't have all the SOPs on our systems and the documentation. So I had to hire people that had experience. I had to hire people that could take that function of our company and run with it and control it and create it, because I can't do that. I'm not an accountant, and I'm good at a lot of areas of the business, but it's not my superpower. So I have to find somebody else that's their superpower and plug them in and then let them run with it and then support them and take down the roadblocks for them. So in this company, my first few hires were all people that knew the business, understood the business. They knew exactly where we were going, what I was trying to build. They knew how to close the gap on some of the stuff that, fell into their realm of the business. And that's how we got going. So my first initiative hires were all, the first person I hired was over $100,000, So when I'm sitting here as an operator doing everything, selling the trucks, quoting the loads, booking the trucks, doing the invoicing, doing the collections, everything. The first person I hired is over $100,000. That's because I needed somebody that could take that workload off on day one. And so that's how I built my leadership team today. Now we have great leaders in place in a lot of different areas. And we can focus on, bringing in more of tactical new hires that they can train and they can mold into their departments.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah. Randy, we want to be respectful of your time. Thank you for being here. Tell everybody where they can find the podcast again and how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, I welcome people to reach out. If it's logistics, reach out to me. If it's something else, like I want to be a resource. Time is limited, but I'll do the best that I can. Even if it's a few weeks out, I'll promise to try to make time. The best place to find anything about me is randyvlasic.com. That links to the podcast, links to all my social profiles. It just makes it really simple. You can links right to my logistics company, LIWMI Logistics, if you want to talk about logistics. And so everything's there.
Okay. Awesome. There it is right there. So everybody can check it out. All right, Randy, thank you so much for being here. I do have one question.
Sure.
Before I let you run. So, what is the wildest story from your career so far?
Oh my gosh. That's a tough question to answer, Matt, because there's a ton of wild ones. I think what's relevant to the audience probably is, when I launched the company I launched it in 2019. I didn't know really exactly what it all looked like yet. I knew I was starting a freight broker, so I didn't actually know what it looked like. So we didn't actually move our first shipment until December of 2021. I took a year off after my exit and spent some time really working on myself. 2021, I launched. COVID was the best and worst thing that happened. So they shut down the ports, they opened it up. Everybody needs inventory. Everything's exploding. So we caught the end of that. And but after that, so we get to the end of 2021, I hire my first 2 employees. 2022, the whole market falls out. Now everybody has a ton of inventory. The economy's not moving the way that it was, right? People didn't need the freight, and the trucking industry was getting hammered. So we lost probably 60% of overall business in a matter of just a few months. Yeah. And so I just hired these expensive employees that I just got, right. And I just lost a ton of my business. And I had to make a decision. It was like, I can either let these people go and I can go back to being an operator and do this again, or I can find an alternative way to make some money and cover the gap. And so when I first started the company, I wanted a community. And so I went on a Facebook marketplace and I started to build freight forums where I could bring in other people that owned logistics companies, and I wanted to bring a forum together to share our experiences and help us get through the challenges. And there was so much interest on it. I had 3 people sign up in 2 weeks.
You put this on Marketplace?
Yeah, Facebook Marketplace. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for other business owners. I want to start a forum. I'll facilitate it. Let me know if you're interested. Sign up here.
So what did you create? A Facebook group?
I didn't. I went into a Facebook group that was like a, freight brokers group that was already established.
Yeah.
So I had 300 people sign up in 2 weeks, and I was like, holy cow, I didn't know there was this level of interest. And so instead of running one freight forum, I'm like, let's run a couple. So I was running 5, and I would do one forum session every single week. And it was great.
What do you mean by forum? Let's break that down, because I don't understand what you mean.
So where it started for me, Matt, was I was in entrepreneurs organization, and so you get paired with 10 other business owners in different industries. Business is business, sales is sales, marketing is marketing, whatever. Everybody shares their experiences, they bring their challenges, you help each other overcome those challenges. And so I wanted to do that with freight.
Okay.
So I start this freight forum. I'm running 5 forums. I would do one every single week, and it was so much fun. And I met so many great people. But then when this happened, I lost all this business. I had one particular person in my forum that they wanted to launch another company. And so this opportunity came about, and I had the opportunity to actually consult for them. And I was like, hey, this person's looking for somebody to come out and launch this company and get this thing going. They're asking me advice on, what should I look for in the person to start this? Who's the person I'm looking for, the type of role or responsibilities, whatever. And I'm like, why don't I just do it? And I'm like, I'll come out to California and I'll build this thing for you. And I took on a 6-month consulting agreement with her. And I went and I built a second company at the same time that I was getting mine back on track. And it was wild, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was building teams of people on both ends, running meetings back to back with different teams. It was just a wild ride, but it got us through it.
That's awesome. I love that.
Thanks.
Randy, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, that's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project.